Hi, Dominic. I unmuted you for a moment because I saw you raised your hand. I can't seem to hear you though. Hi, Dorian.
Show me your.
Doreen, is that you?
Yes, Greg. How are you?
Good. Great.
It works. I'm getting
Perfect.
yelled at by my husband because he claims I did something wrong, but I didn't.
Just so everyone knows, we are live on the LMC TV stream.
Great.
Still waiting for one and maybe two commissioners, but I see that we have 5 of us here, so we have a quorum. I know Peter may not be able to attend. David, I mean, may not be able to attend, but I'm expecting the vice chair, so I think we should hang out for a few minutes. All right, there's no real impediment to us getting underway with our business. And if one or more of the remaining commissioners manage to join us in the next few minutes, that's fine, but we have a quorum as it is. So can I get I'm going to make a motion to open the meeting. Can I get a second?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is open. I suppose I don't have to tell anybody where the exits are, but members of the public, if you're at home, you've probably managed to join us. If for any reason you're unable to speak or get audio to work, there are also telephone instructions on the agenda, and the Zoom and telephone are going to be controlled by Village Planner Greg Cutler, who will manage to, if we're taking public comments, we'll manage to give you an opportunity to speak. Do we need to do anything about attendance for the record? I suppose that's question or Christie.
Sorry, what do you mean attendance for the record?
Do we need to make any further record of attendance other than the video itself?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, we have it on YouTube. We have a transcript. Do we have a transcript going, Greg? You're muted, Greg.
We do now.
Yep.
Thank you for reminding me.
So you're good.
Okay, so then I guess the first agenda item is to call applicant 355 Phillips Park Road.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Good evening to you all. My name is Christy Adana from Silverberg Zelantis. I'm here on behalf of the application. Also here this evening, I believe, is Robert Stanciel, the architect, Michael Stein, the engineer, and Dominic Brescia, the applicant. Just first, I'd like to say thank you for holding the meeting in this format, and I hope you and your families are all doing well during this time. This application is for a proposed mixed-use development with a commercial space and parking on the ground level and 6 one-bedroom units on the second and third floor. We had a prior proposal a little over 2 years ago that we had submitted to the planning board, which was to demolish the existing structure and construct 5 townhomes with separate curb cuts and tandem parking. But based upon the comments from the planning board in the village, particularly with respect to the curb cuts and the parking, the applicant decided to redesign the project. Since then, the applicant has made numerous changes to the project, both based upon those comments received in 2018 and also based upon the recent zoning text amendments that were adopted by the village board in August of 2019. So now the applicant is proposing to keep the existing structure, which will contain the commercial space and the parking, and will have 6 residential units on the 2nd and 3rd floors that will be constructed over the existing structure. There will only be 1 curb cut. There will be 7 on-site parking spaces within the structure and 4 that the applicant has a deeded easement to use on the neighboring property for a total of 11 spaces. And that is more than what is required under the code, which I believe is only 6 spaces. The 2nd and 3rd story addition will only be constructed over a portion of the existing structure in order to comply with the new zoning regulations that prohibit construction within the 50-foot setback. And in addition, in order to comply with the new zoning requirements, 1 of the 6 units will be a fair and affordable housing unit. So it will be income restricted and rent level restricted. So we appeared before the planning board twice before so far. The planning board did circulate a notice of intent to be lead agency on March 13th, which I understand this commission did receive and review at your April 1st meeting and has consented to the planning board being lead agency for a coordinated review. So we'll be going through that process together. Based upon the planning board's comments so far, we have made some changes to the proposal already. We were originally proposing strictly retail on the ground floor, and at the recommendation of the planning board, we changed that to commercial in order to provide some more options for tenancy. And we also made some changes to the design of the structure, which I'll let Mr. Stanzial explain. Our submission also addressed certain policies in the LWRP. I'll address the ones that came from that I looked into, and then I'll let the other consultants address theirs. With respect to policy 23, the applicant does not propose to alter or demolish a structure with historic significance. We did go on Chris to research this property and we're not able to find any information. However, we do understand that SHPO was notified of this application through the planning board's notice of intent, and therefore they will have the opportunity to review the application and comment if they deem it necessary. So by looking at the information on Chris and in the LWRP, from our review, it appeared that there were only 2 properties within 500 feet of the applicant's property that have any potential historic significance. Those 2 properties are 4 Staub Court, and the Ward Avenue Bridge. Neither has actually been designated as historic, but both are listed as eligible. And just to briefly expand upon those 2 properties, 4 Staub Court is located just within the 500-foot radius. From the town's assessment records, it appears to be an apartment building. And other than the fact that it has been listed as eligible for historic designation, we weren't really able to find any more information about what could potentially be significant about this property. And with respect to the Ward Avenue Bridge, it's located approximately 250 linear feet from the property and was identified as eligible for historic designation along with 3 other bridges when there was a proposal to remove them. We submit there will not be any impacts to either of these sites from the proposed project, as the applicant is not proposing, obviously, any alterations to these structures themselves. And what the applicant is proposing on its property will be an improvement over existing conditions. The existing structure is a vacant and outdated structure that most recently housed a company that assembled swing sets. And the proposed renovations to the existing structure will be an aesthetic improvement over the existing conditions. And the new addition on the 2nd and 3rd floors, to be built over a portion of the 1st floor, will be zoning compliant under the new zoning requirements that reduce the permitted height from 45 feet to 40 feet. And with respect to policy 25, there will not be any impacts to Harbor Island Park, as the property is more than 1,000 linear feet from the park. We also provided the commission with some information regarding the neighboring properties to show that this proposed mixed use of commercial and residential is consistent with the character of the neighborhood. And just to briefly address a few additional items that I also raised in my letter, the applicant has done a phase 1 environmental assessment, which was submitted to this commission. And there were some recommendations in that phase 1, which the applicant intends to fully comply with. Specifically, it was identified that there are 2 inactive above ground storage tanks located in the cellar, and the applicant will remove those and then also do a limited phase 2 in order to ensure that there was no contamination caused by those tanks. In response to the comments from the County Planning Department and Mr. Cutler, the applicant is willing to make certain additional improvements that will benefit the public, specifically in light of the fact that there is a park next to the site. For instance, the applicant is willing to repair the sidewalk in front of the property in order to make it more pedestrian friendly. And the applicant is willing to install bike racks that can be used by the public. We also submitted a landscape plan that shows proposed landscaping on the streetscape as well as on the 2 proposed garden roofs. So I guess at this point, thank you for letting me do my little presentation. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I can turn it over to Mr. Stanzial and Mr. Stein to go over the architecture and engineering.
I think before you turn it over, this might be a good time to hit the preservation aspects if anybody's got questions about that. And I know who my preservation hawks are. Commissioner Gelber, you have SHPO related preservation questions? You're on mute, Tony.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. This thing's been going in and out. So I think we asked this question at the last meeting. The house is over 50 years old, and I think the applicant had said they had a letter saying it's not eligible. Is that correct?
That's a different project.
Okay.
This is, yeah,
That's 139.
close
That's
by,
137
but a
East
different
Broadway.
project. Yeah.
Oh, all right. I got in late. I'm sorry. So how old is the structure on the property?
I believe, I think the phase 1 noted how old it was. I believe it's from the 1930s, but I can double check on that.
All right. So if it's older than 50 years old, you need to check to see whether it's eligible for either the state register or the national register. And if it's not, we need a letter saying as such. Okay.
Okay, I will just also note that we're not proposing to demolish the existing structure. If that's at all relevant
Right,
to your.
I think it's policy 23, basically. Which
Policy-
policy is it, Maureen?
Policy 23 has more than just demolishing.
Right, absolutely. Right, so any kind of alteration is really subject to policy 23.
Okay, we
And
can.
I have, oops, sorry, Christy. I have a
No.
question. I guess the planning board circulated its intent for lead agency and state historic preservation is on that list.
Yes, that is correct. So they have received the notice of intent and they will have an opportunity to review the application and certainly comment if they deem it necessary.
Well, they should comment.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
Yeah, they typically won't comment unless there's a state agency involved. So if there's like a state SWIP that's required, then they'll comment. So the past couple of times we've actually been sending them requests for review, and there's no basis for doing that in the seeker regs. And they've been kind of, we can see what we can do. Actually, there is a basis in the seeker regs, but on some of the projects there was no seeker. So that's, I'm sorry, I misspoke. So we can ask them separately to review for eligibility.
Okay. If no one has further SHPO 23 related questions, let's move on to the architects and hopefully to the stormwater at some point.
Robert Stanzial. Sorry, the architect should be on.
Yes, all right, so this is Tony. So how, could you just explain how the stormwater system will work and what year of, flood level that you're gonna design it to?
Michael Stein, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. This is Michael Stein.
Okay.
Greg, if I could share my screen. And I'll
Yeah,
put-
just click the share screen. I promoted you to panelist.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Again, Michael Stein, Hudson Engineering. So we basically very similar to the last concept. We're taking all the roof runoff and the runoff coming from the parking under the building. We're directing it to a mechanical separator, and we're bringing it to the village's existing catch basin, which discharges into the Merrimack River. Currently, there's nothing in place on the site to treat stormwater, so it's all basically untreated stormwater that leaves the site. So again, we're meeting the village's regulations by basically putting a water quality component onto the system. There is no change in impervious area. That will remain the same because we're not increasing the footprint of the building.
Very good. I have a question, Michael.
Sure.
Where's the 50-foot riverine buffer on the survey?
30-foot easement.
Is it the hatched line?
That's not the survey. This is your plan. Yeah, there's a 50-foot riverine buffer.
It's a 30-foot easement, and I believe that's for the 24-inch trunk sewer.
No, I'm talking about the buffer from the river.
I don't believe that's shown.
We need that.
That's
Okay.
on the architect's plans.
It should be on all plans.
We can definitely add it to our plan. Hold on, let me. New share.
But I didn't see it on the survey. So I don't know how all the plan sheets match up because it's not on the survey.
We can definitely make sure that gets added in.
Yeah.
What now, as long as we're talking about this issue, what is the actual distance from the water's edge to the what would, looking at it, I guess, be the front right-hand corner of the building?
It's the mean high water line, Thomas.
Yeah, no, I asked a different question. What's the actual distance?
Did this come up? The architect's plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So right here is the 50-foot wetland setback to that point.
Okay.
I see that,
it's
but I'm not
four-
sure how it's determined. I don't know how that was determined when it's not on the survey.
It would have been determined by the edge of the stone wall along the river. So, but we can have that added to the survey and to our plan. That's not a problem.
Well, the mean high water line is what we're talking about. That's where it starts.
Okay, I can have that. I'll make sure the surveyor picks that up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, is this, so then, does this, as far as just flood protection goes, as far as the code goes, Greg, what do they have to do flood, mitigation measures on this thing?
We are not in the flood zone, and sorry, and then that was one of the things that Greg had put up last time.
Yeah, if you want me to share the flood map, I can show you.
No, you just I guess repeat yourself if you don't mind.
It's exactly as Mike said. It's not in the flood zone. The way that the river runs at that point, it turns, and where the building is located is at a high elevation, so it's not actually in the flood zone.
Okay. Okay. So they don't need to raise it up or put any flood panels or anything like that.
Correct.
No.
Okay.
And just as a reference on this drawing, this is where Chrissy was saying that they're putting the bike racks in this area along with the permeable pavers.
There's also a wall going in that area, correct?
Correct.
Well, proposed.
Yes, correct.
What's the distance to the stone wall from the existing building?
Did that switch screens? I'm just not sure.
It
Yeah.
did. I can, I can see the elevation line. I could see elevation lines on the contours.
I'm
the
not
map, but I
sure of the
can see
exact
it.
distance, but that's something I could definitely add on.
Okay, that'd be useful to know. Thank you.
Yes.
So Mike, what's going to go on with the existing building? That's parking. So how are you going to capture the runoff from the parking area?
So we have, right here, we have a trench drain along the driveway entrance where it comes in. That's collected, then brought out of the building into the mechanical separator right here. And all the roof leader drains are going to tie in at this point along the central point, and then also connect into the mechanical separator.
So on that parking area, which is now an existing building, there are going to be no drains whatsoever?
No, at the door where that's leading into the building. So it's all.
I'm talking about in the interior of the building, interior parking lot, no drains.
Interior parking lot, yes, drains. The
Okay.
driveway right here, we're pitching it all towards this, where the door is right here. And that's a trench drain going across. The contours are all directing the water into that point.
Where is garbage and refuse going to be stored?
Concrete washout. I think that's something the architect would have to answer. Let me see if it's shown here.
Another project, you know what we're getting at as far as there's going to be no water in that garage area whatsoever?
Only snow melt.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if this is the architect that called in. I'm just gonna, is that you? Is that Robert? I don't think that's him.
You have a couple of areas that you're capturing, Mike, the roof runoff, and they're all going to a hydrodynamic separator before it goes where?
Sorry. I'm just trying to get to the architect's plan that shows. So here's the architect's plan. Refuse collection at this point inside the building. And I believe it's intended that it's going to be cans themselves that someone would need to bring out.
So in other words, someone's going into the building with a truck to...
No, we have the doorway right here. They'd actually wheel it out of here and wheel it out this way. You wouldn't have a garbage truck go inside. It would just be wheeled out.
It's going to remain on the sidewalk when it's done.
Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know if Dominic's on and he'd be able to answer that question.
That's on the parking level, correct?
Correct.
We're going to have to find that out. That's a known.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, you're on.
Yeah, Greg, the architect is having like technical difficulty right now, and I've been texting him and calling him. He's going to try to call into you soon. I don't know what the problem is, but anyway, I just signed off with him. He's trying to get on. But what was the question that you needed from the architect? I'm pretty knowledgeable with everything that he's doing specifically. What do we need to know?
Use and recycling room. Is that going to be a room where garbage is picked up from and stored?
What do you mean, Doreen? Be more specific with the question. You mean, is someone going in there?
There's going to be, the refuse has to be stored for a period of time before it's picked up.
That is correct. There's a refuse recycling room, which is when you go in the parking garage on the right-hand side. That's where the hour is right now. That's where it's located at this time.
Okay, so whoever's picking up the garbage is going to go in there?
No, we'll put it out. We're going to try to set it up where we're going to be maintaining it and putting it out on the days that.
If you need to clean that area, how is it done?
Well, I spoke to Michael, I believe on his plan, I believe Thomas did it. We actually have a drain in there that's being put in. So when we clean it out, it'll go down into the drain and out. Is that it, Mike, that you're pointing at?
That is it right there then.
That's it. I just told Thomas to put that in a couple of weeks ago. which that is, if you interpose the architectural plan on top of the engineering plan, that would be the refuse room, and that's how it will be cleaned out. It'll be cleaned up, water goes down and goes into the storm scepter or filter there.
Scepters where, Mike? I love Zoom. This is great.
Right here. That's where that drain inlet is.
Well, Mike, she's
That leads-
talking about where's the storm scepter. That actually is right near the retaining wall.
Where's
So-
the storm center located?
If you
Right near
go,
the front of the
that's where it's
retaining wall.
located right there.
Oh, it's in there? Okay.
Yeah. So that's where the drain inlet is, in this room.
Okay. And that's the outlet.
Yes, and that connects into here, which
Yep.
then goes into the mechanical separator right here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
On the river side, I guess I have a concern about the lighting and its impact on the, you know, the species and habitat, and not even if they're just normal species. So you have a light, you know, what's the lighting situation that overlooks the river?
We have not perfected a lighting plan per se as of yet, but since that is one of your concerns, you can give us some direction on what you are looking for, and we will be open and receptive in doing that. So your primary concern is water shining down on the river or species that are near the river?
Well, you know, it's kind of a wildlife area, and so, you know, can you go back, put no, that's the street side. Do you have a backside picture or a rendering?
Hold on one second. It's under a tab that I'm trying.
Hey, Chris, is Rob on
Dominic,
that?
can you have him send me his phone number? So if it's one of these numbers, I can unmute him.
Hey, Greg,
It's,
Yeah, just to my email.
okay.
sent it to you, Christie.
Yeah.
So this is, Tony, this is the elevations of the building.
Okay. All right, so I mean, I guess the light coming from the rooms, we really don't have much control over. But I guess we would like to see if you're gonna put any lights on the outside of the building that will shine toward toward the river, or toward that kind of, look like a little bit of a grassy area there.
Right.
Basically, you know, I think they call it dark sky. There's a couple of terminologies, dark sky light.
Skylight position, where the lights go down. They don't come up into, they go down.
They're like downlights.
Well, it's called dark sky lighting, and it's meant so that it goes down and doesn't affect the
Okay.
species.
Okay, so just to let you know, as you can see, the existing building is where it is. It'll be, brought up to date, but the new portion of the building is set back. So with the new portion, we will still try to put the up and down dark sky lighting there, but on the new side where the pavers are, sort of say, we could, it looks like, for example, we would maybe put 2, possibly 3 lights proportioned along that side elevation. And you guys would be okay with that, for example?
Can you use the pointer to show us where you're talking about?
Where the pavers are,
Go to
is-
that south elevation. Go to the
Okay.
south elevation. You see right there? So that's the existing building. New windows will be cut out. And so we would propose to accommodate your concerns, putting 2 to possibly 3 dark sky lights up and down, 1 possibly close to the middle and 2 on the outside. And that would alleviate your concerns as far as the lighting closest to the river.
I mean, I think, I would prefer no lights, but I know people get nervous, and the dark sky is what people use, and
Okay.
maybe not too many lumens that it looks like Luna Park.
Okay.
I have Robert on, but he needs to lower his computer volume because there's feedback when I unmuted him. So just
Okay. Thank you,
There's my
Greg.
one comment. Sorry.
Speaking from, oh, go ahead, Martin.
I just, before we got too far away from the stormwater, I just had some questions about the stormwater.
Sure.
Are we coming back to that, or are we off onto lights and other things now?
Oh, let's keep going on stormwater. It's an important consideration. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so I have a question actually regarding the view that's in front of us right now. So if you look at the two bottom renderings, I guess what would be the new front of the building and the south elevation, the Phillips Park Road elevation and the south elevation. So what I'm trying to understand is you just described that you're going to tilt the parking area towards Phillips Park Road, which would mean you'd have to raise the back of it to lean towards Phillips Park Road. But if you look at the side elevation here, the garage door looks like it's about 3 or 4 feet higher ground level than the floor level of the existing building. So to me, that means you'd have to raise above 3 feet and then maybe another couple feet to make it tilt towards the door. So it seems like there wouldn't be enough height at the back of the parking lot to allow that to happen.
No, as we're going in with the parking garage, there's gonna be adjustments to the floor elevation, so we'd be pouring a new floor. And when I say grading, you have a 2% pitch, which is 50 foot deep. You're talking maybe a foot difference between the front and the rear. The front of the garage door compared to the rear of the building.
Hey, but what's the height that you have there? You can't see my mouse, but what's the height of the garage door?
So you have the bottom of the steel is 34.5, and the elevation of the front of the garage is 25.27. So you have about 8.5 feet below the bottom of the steel itself.
Okay.
And the steel framing.
Okay. Because if you look, if you move over to the right, the existing floor looks to be a few feet. No, I'm sorry. If you look at the front view and you look where the commercial space is going to be, that's where the existing floor of the building is.
Correct. And these right here are the elevations of the different components within the building. So that's why I say the bottom of the steel framing for this entire floor is at 35 or 34.5. So at the entrance to the commercial space is 22.58, which means you have a higher ceiling height in that section of the garage. I'm sorry, that section of the building that gets reduced as you go over to the garage and as well as the building entry all the way to the left.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying that if you're going to elevate, if you're going to pitch the whole floor to lean towards that, it just seems like it's going to be very tight in there. But the other question I had is on the Spencer Street side. There's where the existing 4 spaces are.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, I haven't been over at that building in a while, but there's a decline that goes down to the side of this building, and there's a big garage door there currently, correct?
Correct. Yes, there is. Can you hear me?
Robert, how are you?
All right. God, I'm finally in here. Sorry. Jeez.
So how is the stormwater being handled that's running down there towards the new edge of your building that's not going to have that?
Well, there is existing drainage in that parking lot, and we're going to have to modify the pitch in that the grading in that parking lot to pitch back to the drainage that's there now, because we're closing.
I don't know if that's been specified.
Okay, we can specify that on there, sure.
All right, it's a little bit glitchy going in and out, so it's jumping when I'm trying to
sorry.
a little bit.
So does the no net fill rule, does this cause any problems with that ruling in our code?
That's it within the floodplain.
Yeah, and this is not within a floodplain,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
that's not a consideration.
And what about the back of the property is that's either, it must be in the wetland or the wetland buffer, right?
Yes, it is.
Actually, they're not pursuing a wetland permit because a wetland is defined in our code as an area that's 2,500 square feet or larger and typically supports hydrophytic vegetation. And the river in that area is not a mapped wetland, and it wouldn't require a wetland permit.
That river is a wetland in our LWRP, and it is a wetland, but it doesn't make a difference if there's a wetland permit or not. We have a policy.
All right, so policy 40, let's see. Policy 44, preserve and protect tidal and freshwater wetlands and the benefits of such from these areas. So so can we go back to that kind of plan, Michael?
Yeah, which one? This?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Okay. So is there any new construction or work within 100 feet of the stone wall on the river?
Almost all of it.
Almost all of it. So to me, that's a problem, because to me, that's a wetland buffer.
So the standard that we've typically articulated, the standard we've consistently articulated, is that when there's work within 100 feet of a wetland, we want to be able to be assured that there is no adverse impact to the environment to the wetland environment from the work within the buffer. Here you got a stone wall between the construction and the river. You're working entirely in existing disturbed areas, so that you know where we're going when we come back. Commissioner Gelber and a few others of us are thinking, well, if that's within 100 feet of a wetland, and the river is a wetland, as in the LWRP, if not by code, then we're going to want to know that there's no adverse impact to the wetland environment from the work that's going on within 100 feet of it.
Can I throw a hint to that, Thomas?
So it's always good for the applicant to know what you're thinking.
Well, we didn't review the landscape plan, but tree removals are coming our way for the benefit of giving that building sunlight. Why is there such reverb coming from my phone? Anyway, there is also there are residential homes in behind that building, and tree removals are there and revegetation, and that's not kosher when it comes to wetlands.
I'd also like to point out that in your map in the natural resources inventory in the LWRP, it does not show the river as a wetland.
If you go to the National Wetlands Inventory, you can drill down on the fact that it's a federal wetland. The river is a federal wetland. We've been talking about this for 6 years. On that note, did the applicant or the planning board circulate their intent for lead agency with contacting DEC, Army Corps, and DOS?
I would have to take a look at the notice of intent and see who was on that list, but I can certainly look into that.
I had a look and I didn't see it. I didn't even.
We did not. we didn't. Sorry. I wasn't sure if that was directed at the applicant or me.
Okay, so for the applicant, just so that you are prepared for the list next time, we're going to want to make sure that there's nothing additional needed that hasn't already been sought and dealt with from Army Corps of Engineers, from DEC, DOS, from SHPO. Am I leaving anything out that would apply here?
So Thomas, we want a complete and accurate application, a complete and accurate CAF. We need letters of no jurisdiction or permits from the agencies you just mentioned: DOS, Army Corps, DOS, DEC, SHPO. Right? I think that's, and then
I think that's a complete list.
What about the ownership ownership, land ownership, is there any contention on that?
There aren't underwater lands and rivers, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Doreen.
Also, my thinking is that, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, the Westchester County Stream Control Permit, and when it goes to Westchester County Planning Department, that the environmental people are asked for their input.
It's already gone to Westchester County.
They already replied as well.
Yeah, they provided comments.
Which
That's
Wolf
right,
gave-
now that I think about it. But they didn't talk, they talked about the Westchester County 2 plans, 2025 and another. But the first thing on those county plans are, you can't go forward unless environmentally it's kosher. That's why I'm asking if the county's planning, environmental planning people have weighed in. I hadn't seen that.
We haven't seen, I don't believe we've seen anything from them either.
Right. We'll need that.
We can certainly look into that.
Can we talk about potential policies? And then I have a question about the code that was documented in the attorney's memo. As far as I'm looking at this, definitely policy 44 and potentially policy 12, because the wall in the river can be looked at as an erosion control structure, but more importantly, it deals with wetlands and leaving them intact. Potentially 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37 also. And
20.
remember, in policy 44, policies 7, 7A, and 8 are included in wetlands.
23, Doreen.
Come on. Let's see here.
23 is the historic preservation.
23.
Leaving that out because we haven't heard anything from SHPO yet.
I know, but they have to deal, it's a policy that may be impacted.
Well, yes, correct. And also the Ward Avenue Bridge is eligible, and it's right there at the property. It's like 100 feet away.
I think the applicant said it's more like 250.
We can double.
If you look at the property, if from the edge of your property line in the rear, it's a lot closer than that. The edge of that bridge is up against the structure behind your property.
We provided a map from Chris that shows, it's I believe Exhibit A, and it shows the location of the bridge and the property, and it appears that the bridge is about halfway between the property and that red line. But we
I
can,
didn't hear it.
we can try to get a more exact measurement.
Thank you. The other question I had was documentation about the zoning code, 34250B5. It says, the development may not contain a building, structure, or parking area within 50 feet from the mean high water line of Long Island Sound or any body of water which flows into Long Island Sound. The planning board may not grant a permit for such building, structure, or parking area under 24030, which is our domain of this code, for the development under this section, unless the building, structure, or parking area is water dependent, as that term is defined in 24030.
The planning board actually looked into that also, and at the request of the planning board, the building inspector, in addition to submitting the zoning compliance chart, did a separate memorandum dated March 30th that was submitted to the commission with our application materials that indicates that there will be no new construction within that 50-foot buffer, and so it will not increase the level of nonconformity.
So you're not touching any of the land outside of that structure?
No, that's why the building is designed the way it is.
That's not my question. None of the land outside of that building is going to be altered?
I believe it may be renovated, but the building inspector's interpretation was that because it's already existing, it would not, we're not adding to it. We're just
Mm-hmm.
leaving it as is while doing the.
So the wall structure was included in his review memo?
Yes.
That's another structure. That's a new structure, which is closer to the river than the building.
Are we talking about the retaining wall?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, now wait, now I'm confused. Can somebody point on the plan to what wall structure we're talking about? Ah, okay.
I believe this is the one that Dorian's speaking about.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
Okay, but that's within,
Sorry about that, Thomas. The limit of disturbance is how far away from the stone wall of the river, Michael?
Like I said, I don't have that answer because I don't have it in, it's not in this drawing, but I can't open
So
it.
you're going to
Well,
provide it. You'll do that, right?
We'll add that in.
Thank you.
That's not, that might be 20 feet.
Right, because the corner of the building to the stone wall, the closest part of the building to the stone wall is approximately 11 to 12 feet. And then as you go further away, it starts opening up accordingly. So it is about 20 feet.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. All right, so can somebody walk me through what's going to change from the existing within the 50-foot buffer on the existing structure? What's going to change as a result of this project?
Robert.
The only thing that's going to change is what we just discussed, the installation of that retaining wall. It's really just to raise the grade on that side to create that area for the bicycle racks and on that side. And nothing else other than we're creating a roof terrace on that portion of the building, on the existing building, which is within the 50-foot buffer. First, on that level, on that rooftop of the existing building. So,
okay.
And that's on the building itself.
And you're going to be removing some trees and stuff too, right?
Yes.
Which one?
They're on the landscaping plan. Hey, Rob, do you have the landscaping plan that you can put on? Because
Yeah.
Urban has them marked out, which ones that.
They're significantly sized.
Okay. Now, while you're looking to move us, I want to tell you what my thinking is on this. On that retaining wall, that is very, very close to the river. So there's a concern with how you do construction there that close to the river that doesn't create runoff and sediment into the river during the construction process. There's a concern for changing any elevation that close to the river and what that does for runoff, not from the parking area or the garbage room where you've provided for a tie into the existing sewer and a hydrodynamic separator, but from the front of the building, from the new outdoor landscaping. and the tree removal and what that's going to mean for soil stability, erosion, runoff into the river, and being that close to the river, what is the environmental impact on the river? It's certainly not a pristine environment, but it's still a wetlands environment. So telling you where we're headed and what questions are likely to focus on when you're back before us.
Thank you.
And
And
the whole project showing in front of us is in the 100-foot watercourse setback.
Basically the entire thing, yeah.
Right, so to me, if it's within the 50-foot where you can't build anything, I don't see how this thing is okay. And then the wetland says, so that means the wetland, the no net fill rule applies. So it seems like there are some significant hurdles to overcome here to make this project consistent with the LWRP.
Well, what I'm grappling with is what the code says, because unless there's a water dependent use, it doesn't seem like a building permit can be granted.
I'm the person who says no net fill more frequently than probably every other commissioner put together. That is a floodplain rule, not a wetland buffer rule. So they're high enough off the river level to be out of the floodplain. So I don't think we have a no net fill concern. We do have a 50-foot setback concern, a 100-foot setback concern, a stormwater concern, and a tree removal concern. So those are live issues, and we're telling you now, folks, that we're looking at those and trying to figure out how those are consistent. So you're going to need to address them.
And I also would be careful to say that the river is a wetland, because there's nothing in the code that supports that. And even when you look at the National Wetlands Inventory, it describes this area as a riverine system. And the system includes all wetlands and deep water habitats contained within the channel. So it seems to me that it's only if you have those habitats within the river that it would be considered a wetland.
Greg, let me clarify something. Coastal Management Program in the state of New York and our LWRP, the entire village is the coastal zone. Any tributary that runs into Long Island Sound is a wetland.
Okay. Well, we're not. That could be an extended discussion that we don't need to have, while we're hearing from the applicant. Let's take that up. Let's take that up in another time. Okay. I think I've hit what I need to hit. And I think we've heard a fair amount from Doreen and Tony, but several commissioners have been very quiet. Does anybody else have questions to ask on this application?
Were we about to get a little bit more information on the tree removals? Don't want to belabor that, but it might be helpful to get that overview.
We actually submitted a response to Susan, the Village of Mamaroneck landscape consultant. A memorandum went out. If you guys didn't get it, or Greg can't show it to you, we'll certainly have it before the next HCZM. And he was very specific on the trees that she wanted removed. And we complied with her request, and all the proposed specimens that are beneficial to the whole water area there that we were putting in, etc. So what we'll do is for the next HCZM submittal, I'll have Earl online to truly comb through all your questions and concerns so that you can understand what the landscaping criteria is for right near the Mamaroneck River there.
I have a few other things. So I'm sorry to keep going back to this parking lot, but if you can pull that up again.
This view?
Yeah, this view. Yep. So you have the handicap parking all the way in the back where the height is going to be its lowest. Is this parking lot high enough for a handicap van to enter and exit?
Yes, it is. And by the way, the level of the parking lot is going to be level. We're raising that grade up to about 2 feet inside. So it's one level. It's not pitched inside at all. It's a slight pitch towards that trench drain, but there's really no water. It's a covered parking area.
Right, I understand that. I understand that. But what was discussed previously is that height of the garage door would be 8 feet, and that there'd be a
9
1 foot pit. Well, 9 feet. There'd be a
It's
1
a
foot
9 foot
pit.
door.
Okay, 9 feet. There'd be there'd be a 1 foot pitch from the back to the front, and so
Not
would
that
mean
much.
it'd be
6 inches the most.
okay. So 9 feet 8 inches. So again, I'll ask the question: is that high enough for a van, a handicap van, to get in there and maneuver?
Yes.
Okay, most handicap vans are higher than 9 feet. So just something to consider. The other question I had is also in regards to the 4 spaces that you're counting in your description on the Spencer Street side. So there aren't any doorways on that side of the building. So are you expecting people to walk up that incline and around if they park in that, or are you going to provide entrance and egress to that area of the spaces that you're providing or including in your property?
Our intention now is just for them to walk up the incline through the parking lot and come down.
And just to answer your question, as far as ADA vehicle height, for an ADA van, it's required to have 96 inches, 8 feet.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah. And I don't believe a van is required for this project.
Just a question. I have a brother who's in a wheelchair, who's in a van. So I always just ask these questions when these things come up, just to make sure that, just to raise the concern. The other question I had was, will there be any other renderings done of the other perspective views, like the view from Spencer Street, and also what the view would be from the residents across the river, what they're going to be seeing?
And behind the building.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is from the other side of the building, because this is obviously the best view of the building. It looks great. But what is it going to look like to the residents on the other side of the river? What's their view going to be? And also, what is it going to look like compared to the other building on Spencer Place that you're sharing the parking with?
Well, I'll discuss that with Dominic and see if we can.
I'm sorry, I was just jotting some. So this is the front elevation conceptual that we're looking at. You would want to see a rear elevation and a side elevation on Spencer. Is that sufficient? So 2 other elevations on an angle. Is it good enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Doreen, anything else?
We'll have that key as well.
How about all 3 sides, south side, the rear side, and the Spencer Place side? You're at it.
Well, if it's taken from the corner, you have the elevation.
You're doing it from an angle, Doreen, so you'll be able to see them from, the whole thing in one shot, as you see here. You almost see the side elevation and the front in one snapshot here. But
Okay.
we'll do it in a way that we won't leave much to the imagination. You'll see how it will look conceptually.
Thank you.
And finally, the last question, it has to do with noise. Since you're going to have that lower deck and that upper deck, is there any noise mitigation being done? And that would be, specify that as well.
Well, there'll be landscaping on the decks. Other than that, not really. So, I mean, there's only 6 apartments in the building, so I can't imagine there'll be that much of a gathering there. So
The decks are only residents access?
correct.
Yes.
So with the weather that we had the other day, I know there's going to be furniture and potted plants on the roof, on both decks.
There will be potted plants, yes. There will
Did
be
you
planters
see-
on there, yeah.
Or weather that we had like the other day?
Hey, Greg,
I don't understand the question.
Does
Rain?
anybody have the landscaping plan that we submitted that you could put up before the board?
I don't have that.
Okay.
I have it if I can
The
share
one
my
I had up,
screen.
I had that up previously. It was-
Christie has it. If you could zoom in on Christie, she could show it to you.
Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Thank you, Greg.
Do you see it up now?
No.
No. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Is,
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are a number of planters on the lower and the upper deck with seating as well.
But by the way, I just want to interject, Doreen, if you look at that landscaping plan, the trees that you were questioning if they were going to be removed, see the note there. This is again per the Village of Merrick consulting, landscape consultant, that she wanted that to be that way. So we just went along with her suggestion. And
she's asked tree removals?
yes, yeah, in her memo. We could, you know, get that to you before next meeting.
That would be helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
But what I'm at is there's going to be furniture on the top of those roofs, and you have boxwood and planters. Are they all going to be stabilized to the roof?
Yeah, absolutely. They have to be by code. Yep.
Okay.
Guys, I just have two other quick things. Well, I don't know how quick they're going to be, but in the document that we received on 413 from the chair, you had mentioned, Commissioner Burt, about the water ponding against the retaining wall reveal. And I don't believe that we addressed that when we were talking about the stormwater mitigation. That was your concern, that water was going to pond?
I believe that was my memo.
Yep.
From
Sorry.
Definitely was
Brian
mine.
from Colored Sessions.
Oh, hey, Brian.
Hi.
Same haircut though.
Yeah, same barber.
Yeah, there you go. Apologies. But yeah, so I just picked that up in that document, and so I wrote a note about it, making sure that we discussed what that concern was.
Right. I think based on the grades they showed, that new retaining wall has about a foot or 12-inch reveal. And just the way that it was pitched, it seemed like the water would pond up against that reveal rather than drain out. I think it can be addressed quickly with just some additional grading or spot grades. But Mr. Stein can maybe chime in on that one.
Yeah, I think that's just gonna be a matter of either some regrading, adjusting what the proposed grades are to pitch it, and if we need to add a small inlet to collect it, it'll be a matter of adding a small inlet.
Right.
Again, and the last thing I have is that is back to the phase 1 environmental review and removal of the tanks. So in that document, there's one line that says that the building used to be used as an auto repair and machine shop. So I'm just wondering what testing has been done on the rest of the floor surface to make sure that no contaminants have leached through the concrete into the soil below for the rest of the property, not just where those 2 tanks that you're removing are.
I believe that phase 1 said that it recommended doing a limited phase 2 to ensure that there was no contamination from that prior use, and the applicant intends to follow that recommendation.
Oh, okay, it sounded like you said earlier that that was only going to be done around where the tanks were being removed, but you're saying it's going to be the entire property?
Yeah, because I apologize if I misspoke. Because the phase 1, the recommendation for the phase 2 was, as you're saying, with respect to the prior use of the property. So to whatever extent that's necessary based upon that use, that's the recommendation, and that's what will be followed.
Okay, great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks for covering that, Martin.
Okay, what are there any other commissioners with questions? We have a short turnaround to comment for planning, which is the lead secretary agency. Fortunately, we also have several people who've paid a lot of attention to this and already sort of know what they think. We need to give them comments on potential policies and concerns by Friday. That is not the way I want it. That's just the way it is. Can I deputize a working group of 2? If you'll serve, Martin and Tony, you sound like you have this really clear in your heads.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, and it's 48-hour turnaround. It's like I said, not the way I want it. It's just the way the schedule broke. Thank you.
Is it
gentlemen.
an end of day Friday?
Yeah, yeah. End of day Friday.
Yeah, and I can talk to the chair of the planning board and see if like when's the latest you could have it to her
And
or to the planning board.
Sunday night would be better, Greg.
Yeah, yeah, Sunday night would be better.
Okay, I'll talk to her. She'll probably accommodate that. It's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Very much appreciated. Okay, applicant, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You.
Be well.
You too.
Bye.
All right, we are on to old business. I think the first thing up on the agenda is the LWRP update. It was circulated with the packet one more time. Greg, as I went through it again this time, there are still a number of open items before it's really done and dusted. What's the process from here until all the yellow highlighting drops out?
So I've prepared a redraft that I believe addresses most of the comments that DOS has made, and I forwarded that to Andrew for his review, and I believe he's been going through that. And when that's done, I think there's no need to keep it any longer. We should share it with the rest of the commission and have it circulate for comments.
Okay, with a view to adopting it May 20.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a long comment.
I'm sorry. What was that, Doreen?
It's a very long document.
Yeah.
If we receive it in a short time frame before our next meeting, I could say that's difficult.
Yeah, that's fair enough. If we don't feel like we've had time to look at it, we're not going to rush that process. But if we get it substantially in advance, hopefully everybody can dig into it, and we can at least know what we have to do if we still have work on it.
Our commission spent 6 months to do the product that needs to be edited. So just to give you a little idea.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be, and I'll have Christy clarify if this is true, but I think it would need to be in like non-forum working groups, because we'd be sending it around and everyone would make comments, and that would be creating, doing public policy without the public. So it might be best to have to send it to a smaller working group, bring it to the May 20th. This is just a suggestion. Bring it to the May 20th meeting so the full board can discuss it and give feedback, and then I can itemize all those changes that the board wants, and then have that ready for the following meeting.
Okay. If I sound aggressive like this, I on how to go about this, it's just because I want to keep a foot on the gas. These things tend to, it's easy to put it off one more. Okay. And Andrew, do you have an idea when it'll be ready for circulation?
Well, I have plenty of time on my hands, so I think that early next week. I did work on it today. I got a good chunk of it done, but I can send something back to you in a couple days.
Oh, and Andrew, sorry, did you get the red line version? Because I don't know if I sent it to you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I had it.
Okay, good.
Terrific. Thank you for doing that. I very much appreciate it. Okay, so we're keeping that moving forward. Wetland law. It's up for working group this time for the second, I think the second meeting in a row. Has everybody had a chance to go through it and look at it?
Yes.
Okay, Doreen, I think your comments have all been incorporated, or substantially all been incorporated. Does anybody have comments tonight? Proposed changes? Anything that you think we ought to do with it?
I had Seamus and I looked at it. I had a couple of comments. One was the size. I wasn't clear. Are we saying 1,000 square feet? Because tonight's, any property.
Definition of wetlands, I believe, right, Tony?
I'm sorry?
This is, I think just to be specific, if it's helpful, I think this is section A in the definition of wetlands, where it may define, this area as 1,000 square feet or larger, if I'm reading that right.
Right, so that was what I was referring to. So to me, that's too large, because any lot 150, 200 feet wide that abuts a river can have a wetland on it. And, and then you've got places with like a tidal pool or something, or even a little wetland pool. I think we need to refine the size of what we're going to call a wetland. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, good thought. Others?
Doesn't the federal manual delineate what a wetland is, and it's not just on size, it's by other factors?
Well, Doreen, right in that same definition, it does refer to the federal manual for identifying jurisdictional wetlands. It might be a legal read, Christy, I don't know, but it's the question of whether this document trips a potential applicant into this process based on the definition of wetland here, and whether there's a size limit to it.
I'd have to look at the federal manual. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I mean, I'm happy to do that, but I'd have to look at it.
Okay, so the issue is whether that's disjunctive or conjunctive, whether it's a necessary or sufficient condition to be a wetland within the meaning of the federal manual.
Are you asking me? Sorry, you're asking them.
Well, it was Seamus's comment. So the question is whether it's properly read to make the federal manual definition a sufficient or a necessary condition.
Yeah, I mean, my thought, and Tony and I talked about this together, I think he's got the same thinking, is that if something is a wetland, I think that's where the federal manual helps. I think this definition for this document for wetlands seems to set a size that it needs to be for this document to be operative. And so it may be that there's a wetland, maybe even a very big wetland, but a property has only a very small amount of it on their property. So they don't properly fall into what we think they maybe should, having to get a wetland. And I could be misinterpreting this, but that's...
Yes, so this is very similar to the existing language. It's the same, except it's been reduced from 2,500 square feet to 1,000 square feet. And the wetland is not defined by any property boundaries. So as long as the wetland is over 2,500 square feet currently, the buffer is measured from the edge of that wetland. And no matter how big a property is, it doesn't matter if they're proposing to do some kind of regulated activity within that area, they have to get the permit.
Okay, so then Tony's point is probably going to be, is 1,000 square feet fine? Are we fine with people doing whatever on a 900 square foot wetland, maybe? Right, right, Tony?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll add.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll add something, because hydric soils are considered wetlands, and they aren't wet at all. And I don't know if we're dealing with those issues also, because that's one of the definitions. There might not be any water whatsoever for a good part of the year. So I'm not sure that size matters.
No, the hydric soil is in there in the definition. I actually don't have it up in front of me as we read, but.
Now, I know it is, but however, there doesn't have to be water for it to be a wetland.
But that's how it's written, I think, Dorian, because it's an or. So it's got hydric soils or an inundation by surface water.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So that's right. Now we want to stick with but the question of the minimum size for it to require a wetland permit. That's a fair comment. Okay.
The other thing I thought about, or I had a comment on, was, okay, so you've got a document that has a lot of words in it. not saying good or bad, but we're saying, looking pretty good. Okay, and then it gets to our commission, and to me, is it enforceable? And, you're a lawyer, so you know this a lot better than I do. But do we, should we have someone who's both a kind of a wetlands expert and a lawyer look at this to say, okay, this is enforceable and it doesn't have loopholes? I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, so that should either get done at our level or the BOT level, but at some point somebody should do it. And that's probably means it's going to be the same person.
Well, the other thing is we received a memo from William Sharp at Department of State, who talked about how bad our wetland law is, and that's the go-to person for the coastal management program in the state of New York.
Doreen, was he commenting on a wetland law that's very similar to this one? I don't know all the background.
No, he's talking about the existing one.
Existing.
That's why we're adopting a new one, because DOS told us that our old wetlands law was insufficient. Okay, if I have no problem with showing him a draft wetlands law if he would take the time to look through it. I just have no idea whether that's the case.
All you have to do is contact the Department of State and see who the attorney is now, Thomas, because William Sharp retired.
Okay. I mean, they may be overwhelmed and not able to attend to that, but I suppose it's worth asking. So I'll undertake to do that reach out.
Thank you.
Can I ask if a lot of thought went into the notification and the newspaper publication requirements, or is that just something that was taken from another municipality?
That's in DEC law.
Okay, because it's vastly different than all of our other notification requirements, and we've been trying to merge them to make it all the same, just from an administrative perspective.
That's an environmental conservation law article. Is it 24 or 25? I don't remember which.
Doreen, if you can get me the environmental conservation statute you just cited, and Greg, if you could get me the existing notice requirement as it appears in our other laws, it may make sense to harmonize that, unless there's something actually to be gained either in harmonization with state requirements or in separate notification. Then there's a benefit to having it harmonized.
Environmental Conservation Law, Article 24 is either tidal or freshwater, and 25 is either tidal or freshwater. I just can't remember which is which. But
okay,
it's environmental, but you have to look at both.
But if the notification requirements, if you're talking about the notification requirements, if you could pull the notification requirements for those and send them to me, so we can sort of assess whether there's a value add in being consistent with those instead of consistent with our other land use notification requirements, I'll do the evaluation. I just want somebody to spoon feed me the material.
No problem.
Pardon me while I make some notes. That's Doreen. That's Greg. Okay, we've covered notification. We've covered the size of the wetlands to make the document operative, and any other areas that we want to take one more look at before this appears before us again.
So I'll say just that I don't have any other comments. What I read is kind of the most important parts of this were the regulated activity of what trips this up, and then the standards for permit decisions. And I thought they were good. I thought they were broad where they needed to be, and would do a good job protecting the wetland assets of the village. But if anyone hasn't looked at it in as much detail and wanted to look at two places, that might be what I'd recommend. But all that's just to say that I had no other comments and thought it looked pretty good.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's I think that's probably about as far as we can get with that this evening. There's a couple action items for Doreen, for Greg, for me. Thank you, folks. Outfall jetty. Andrew, I think you're on.
Yes, I've been looking into the jurisdiction question. I sent a memo out earlier. I spoke to former chair of the Harbor Coastal Commission back in 2016. There was a similar the same project was, I guess, initiated back then. And from my research, it appears that we do have jurisdiction over this. Doreen was nice enough to give me Mr. Ressler's number. I did call him to try to get some input on this. The idea here is not to frustrate what the county is trying to do. Clearly, the pier needs to be repaired. It's just more or less a matter of landscaping and highest and best use of that land. It is in a very important position in the park. A couple of things that we thought about were to make it open to the public, make it some kind of marine facility, or have some kind of marine facility attached to it as it was way back when, or have it as a wildlife sanctuary, or a combination of all those. But when the county originally came forward, it appeared that there was a little bit more to be explored, some more alternatives that could be discussed. In our call this morning with Greg, Greg, again, Greg, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think the gist of what we discussed would be that the county would be open to working with us on that. So what I'd like to do is I'd just like to get a dialogue going with the county, and and the other thing is, from a legal point of view and precedence, if something falls within our jurisdiction, I just think it's bad form to just kind of look the other way or not, play our part, even if it's something that isn't going to be heavily, even if the participation isn't going to be super involved, we should at least, if it falls within our jurisdiction, play some type of role, more than what was, at least during my tenure, was the one very short, brief meeting that we had with the county. So I'd like to see that the property used for something that would be a benefit to the harbor and to the village, and something that would be a little bit more than what it is now. So Greg, do you want to kind of rehash what we discussed today in terms of the county's good neighbor policy and some of those other things?
Yeah, so the county has taken a new approach with their projects, where they like to have a dialogue with the local communities, and really improve upon the projects that they do within each community. And so my understanding, and I haven't talked directly with the county on this project in particular, but on some other sewer infrastructure projects in the village, they've been more than open to changing landscaping, tweaking designs, and accommodating the village's requests. And in my discussions with Hernani, he seemed to think that they would do the same in this circumstance. So I talked to you last week and advised you to reach out to Jerry, the village manager, to try and start that dialogue. And he has directed Hernani to reach out to Westchester County to have a meeting with you and the chair if you all are available, and with the county and with village staff to hash out the details.
Yeah,
That's all
that's
well.
great.
This is
That's
important,
great.
and I will make myself available for that.
Yep, that's great. I appreciate that.
That's very well and good, gentlemen, but there are some issues that we do have from the correspondence that we received from DEC. And Greg had to reach out to the Department of State because they did a coastal consistency concurrence. Yet what we put forth on the table with the permitting was not considered by any of our our agencies that we deal with. How are we going to resolve that?
So what you're saying is that the consistency coordination letter wasn't incorporated in the DOS consistency concurrency?
The consistency concurrence that the Department of State did was by one person and not in the way that it wasn't within the regs for them doing consistency concurrence. Doesn't meet the general consistency concurrence criteria.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, you'd have to talk to DOS.
Actually, there's a procedure that we can, as a commission, if we review the procedure, the documents from the DEC and the DOS, you'll see that, and what we've submitted, all the documentation that we've submitted to all agencies, and it's pretty clear that if you have a handle on all of that, that we have the opportunity to mediate with the Secretary of State to essentially resolve some conflicts. Because we really weren't, our considerations of what we put forth on the record regarding the LWRP on 2 occasions were not even addressed.
So I had one of the first meetings of this recent round with them. I don't know, I guess it was last summer, and they seemed very cooperative. But that the question of jurisdiction was very paramount, and they really would have preferred that we didn't. But if we do, then I think we had reviewed it once last fall, and there was the rock. So there were a bunch of problems with kind of removing the steel and putting the riprap, and then whether DEC liked that. So to me, there was a bunch of technical problems. There was the aesthetics of the fence and the lights, and then the use, right? So to me, there's different categories to this project. And then the other thing was they were going to do a fund, right? And then what that we were going to do with the fund. And if you so to me, this is a pretty complicated, well, it may not be complicated, but it has at least 4 parts to it. And so I think that, we might want to lay this out as, I mean, you want me to take a stab at laying out the parts, Thomas, and just, I don't know. I mean, to me, there's a lot of pieces to this thing.
May I interrupt, Chair, very quickly?
Hang on just a second,
Okay.
Christy. You've got stuff happening between now and the weekend, Tony. So that don't turn to that right away.
It wouldn't no, it wouldn't be. It would be after the weekend for sure.
But right, but we certainly we're at least going to have further dialogue with the county about this, and maybe with the state about how they deal with our consistency. So I guess Christy had a point to make about that. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to make a quick point. And so Andrew, I appreciate your memo and your research on this matter. I still think the question of jurisdiction is a little bit up in the air. We have found some case law between the county and the village. That case law specifically pertains to zoning ordinances, but it does say that it's now well settled that a county or municipality is not subject to zoning restrictions in its governmental function. So
that has, I don't mean to be too blunt about that. I don't believe that provides us any guidance. Zoning is inapposite.
No, so I understand that, but Mr. Spolzino and I were looking at it, like I said earlier, and that was sort of our basis. We don't know how that would apply to HCZM. So I don't know if that's something that we would be able to carry over. HCZM is very particular, so it would have to be something we'd have to look into further. But that was kind of our starting point. But my whole point in saying this is that I think jurisdiction is still a little bit up in the air. If you would like us to, we're happy to look into it further. We're happy to give you a memo on that, do a bit of research on our part. But the reason that I bring that up is I don't know and I may be a little confused, but what Commissioner Gelber and Commissioner Roney are saying, I don't know if those things are happening, if the idea is that we have jurisdiction, or if we're saying that even if we don't have jurisdiction, we're still uncomfortable with what's happening. So the only reason I wanted to bring that up is that if we are saying it because we have jurisdiction, I think that question is still a bit up in the air. If we would be saying it regardless, totally fine. I just wanted to make that a point. And I also appreciate the efforts between the county and the village to get this resolved outside of any, this type of research. So.
Okay.
I do have a question for our attorney, Thomas.
Before I'll let you go ahead and ask, but before that, I want to say that I'm going to take this discussion offline. But go ahead, Doreen, so we know what you're thinking.
The village has an underwater land grant. We are the owner of the underwater land grant. And this work is going to encroach on this underwater land grant. So I don't know how we cannot be more jurisdictionally involved. We own the grant, the county doesn't.
Okay, and with that, thank you, Doreen. And with that, I'm going to take the jurisdiction question offline, and I think Andrew and I are going to deal with council on that at the sub-quorum level. So we are through the old business on the agenda, and we are up to the approval of minutes. Has everybody that wanted to have a look through our February 25th meeting minutes had the opportunity to do so? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks. I don't think, we had added to the agenda at the last minute the correspondence we received from a concerned citizen about the Department of Public Works and its sedimentation and bare soil at the Columbus Park area by the riverside.
Yeah, the Jefferson Street Bridge or whatever that is. Yeah.
Yeah, at the parking lot over at Jefferson Avenue Bridge. So, Greg, can we? Thank you, Doreen, for sending pictures. I feel like we should have an understanding, since it affects sedimentation in the river and the quality of wetland environment. And I don't want to sort of spot address things but from a process standpoint, I think we need to hear from DPW about how it is they ensure they're using best practices with things like erosion and sediment control when they work in a riverine or coastal environment. What do we do to have that dialogue?
Sure. So, we had a call this morning about the agenda and this came up. And so following that call, I reached out to Tony and the village manager about this situation. Tony was unable to make it tonight because he's an essential worker, and trying to run DPW takes a lot of time and effort. So we spoke about the situation at Columbus Park in the parking lot. He indicated that that's a standard thing they do every year or every couple of years. They take the vegetation down. But he did say that if the commission has recommendations on how to do this in a better way that would, promote better sediment and erosion control and stream bank stabilization, that he's more than open to those suggestions and implementing those processes.
I just want to chime in here. So I actually drove past it the other day, and there's actually a river now going from the parking lot to the river. It's eroded away so much that now there's a channel that actually has running water going through it. So it needs to be repaired. So the question is to me is how does this happen? So
Greg, can I just make a quick comment?
As far as repairs concerned, how fast can it be restored? Because you can't leave bare soil like that. It's going into the river.
Right.
So, Greg,
yeah.
One thing about, you had mentioned like that's standard practice of DPW. That really shouldn't be standard practice. We should not disturb any soil that on a riverbank without stabilizing it, whether that's reseeding it, covering with some kind of fabric like filter fabric or burlap, or putting up the silt fencing or putting up hay bales. Something's got to get done. And the other thing that I heard, and I was down there myself before the major rain, the other thing I heard, those are invasive species. We have to remove invasive species. An invasive species on a riverbank is better than no species at all, because the root system of the invasive species is holding that bank from going into the river. So, maybe a better practice would be, to restabilize things or just to mow. I know it's unsightly there, but I'm sure that the village has a mower. If they don't, they could rent something or use an old one that, is going to have a little more wear and tear by doing this. But, the idea is that you want to control the vegetation, mow it off, rather than rip it out. Or
this wasn't, I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah. Or if something has to be ripped out, that, it's immediately covered or immediately planted, or, something along those lines, just so you don't have that much soil right before like a 2.5-inch rainstorm. It just wasn't that's not a good practice. And if that's the standard, the standard should be changed. And, and it's not that difficult to change. It's just a matter, it's actually, you need less equipment. If you were to mow it, it would probably require less equipment than what was done there. It's just a matter of technique. It's not that difficult.
Well,
there was a amount of tree removal too.
Right. Can I chime in on this? Because I think that, that area there is either a wetland or a wetland buffer. A lot of vegetation is on the site. It's a habitat. And so even if it is invasive species, that was a great habitat area. It's adjacent to the river. I mean, you could almost say that's a critical environmental area. And so I'm not saying what the village guys did was right or wrong, but I'm saying, I think getting back to your thought, Thomas, is what's the process here and what are the best practices? Because, a lot of areas like that, people are starting to do environmental assessments to say, okay, what is living in there, right? And then the other part of it is that, when we talked with the village about the whole flood project, one of the things was that you don't do work like that in certain times of year, especially in the springtime when it's a nesting and, it's a little before nesting, but this is really prime time for marshes, for meadows, and for kind of wetlands and buffers. So I think this is, it's not just the erosion, it's this whole critical environmental area concept and how we deal with that in the village.
We as a board sitting once a month can't oversee the work that DPW does every day and shouldn't. We don't want that job and they don't want us to do that job. So I view this as a question of process. I want to have a dialogue with DPW about how it is that they internally manage the competence to think about these things. What's the environmental knock-on effect of the work we're about to do? What's the best process to do this work without causing an erosion hazard, sedimentation condition, or something else that we don't want? So that, what is their process to think about that, to troubleshoot it, and to do it right? And do they need to do anything different in that process to be consistent in managing the work that they have to do in the best way possible to be consistent with the resources that we have, that they respect and want to maintain? It's not, we can't oversee every job order, and they don't want us to. What I view as our job is to oversee the process by which they think about it, because they should have the competence internally. I'm sure they want to, and we just have to talk to them about how they, what resources they need and what they need from us to make sure that they are managing those considerations as best they can.
I have a quick question, Chairman. Does the DPW or any of the work that goes on that's conducted by the village, do they have to adhere to the same things that a homeowner would? So, if they are going to be working within a wetland area, doesn't the village itself have to go through those same?
Yeah, if they were disturbing soil. So my understanding,
Which
and
they did here.
my understanding is that, and I've looked at the site and I can see different, I don't know exactly what they did. I wasn't there watching them do what they did, but my understanding is the root system is still intact underneath. They weren't pulling things or roots out of the ground. And I don't know exactly what happened. And I also just wanted to comment on the invasive species issue. They were not doing a removal project of invasive species. I just mentioned to Andrew that in the past we had put out RFPs for that particular area to do an invasive species removal, which would require a lot more than what was done in this circumstance. And honestly, it proved to be too difficult because the methods that we have to remove invasive species are almost as impactful as just having the invasive species stay there. So that project never moved forward, but I wanted to mention that and make sure that you understood that this was just normal cleanup of vegetation that they would do on a regular basis. And again, reiterate that DPW is more than open to following more protocols and making sure that the practice is more consistent with best management practices.
Right. And my thinking is
how the soil was disturbed. It's certain that there were tracks from a backhoe.
Yeah, I think there must have been a backhoe there. So,
Yeah, we all got that. I just, in case I wasn't clear, it is probably counterproductive in terms of relationships for us to engage in tisk over a particular job. The conversation I want to have with them is they should internalize these concerns, and it's going to be somebody's job at DPW to go, oh, wait, that's not the way we do that. Here's the way we do that. Here's the procedure for handling a sensitive riverine area, right? It's someone's job over there. And I just want us as a commission to have an understanding of whose job it is, what hymnal they're singing from when they do that, so that we can understand that they think about the things they're supposed to think about. And if they're not thinking about the things they're supposed to think about, that they build that into the process, because we can't continually go, well, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. We have suggestions for how you could do that better. We can't undertake a continuous flood of, you did it wrong, here's how you should do it better. They have to build the process by which they oversee their own work, right? That's supervision.
Agreed.
We need to talk to them about process.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, I was talking more generally in terms of suggestions for dealing with vegetation along rivers and in other sensitive areas. I didn't mean specifically to this situation.
Well, we were talking about, Martin asked about a permit, and the soil was disturbed. That's where I was going along the lines of, we can talk about that. I agree with you, Thomas, that, that dialogue needs to be happening with DPW, but now we're faced with an unvegetative area, and what are the plans to move forward with revegetation? Because a lot of trees were cut down also.
Yeah, so in my conversation with him, he said that he thought shoots were already popping up from the bamboo underneath, or the porcelain berry underneath. But yeah, those are definitely questions that need real answers. And the answer I just gave you right now is not substantial.
So I have another question.
Yeah,
If the trees were removed, do they have to check with the tree committee before they remove trees?
That's a good question. I'd have to find out.
I don't know. I don't think they'd have to under the current law, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's definitely a question that we'd have to run.
I agree with you also, Thomas, that, I mean, it shouldn't be a tit for tat back and forth, but I think we can be involved in maybe either educating or helping form the proper procedures for handling these types of things. So.
And share,
well, it is a regulated wetland also, but I will say this: where I'm going at is revegetation needs to happen, and the county did revegetate Columbus Park, and I'm wondering if we can tap into those resources and maybe get a grant to do something quick. And I know it's an emergency time, but maybe something can be done, because that parking lot cannot be left to drain and direct discharge into the river and the wetland there.
And the whole bank is being washed out.
Yeah, probably the first thing that should be done is I don't think you need a grant for a couple $100 in seed. Some type of cold weather annual seed should be spread sooner rather than later. Just to cover it up, and it just doesn't look good that certain we have a standard, we hold the public to a standard, and yet the village does something that is counter to that standard. Just bad optics overall. But something easy, something sufficient should be done as soon as possible. But again, we're not the river cops here. We're purely an advisory board. But if Tony and the DPW is willing to listen, we should try to get a message across, Greg, to just do something to stabilize that soil.
Do we have new environmental planning person? Don't we have an environmental consultant?
Yeah, we've selected a consultant. I don't know if the contract has been signed yet.
Oh boy.
Okay.
And just so you know, Chair, there's a member of the public that has their hand raised.
Excellent. I'd like to hear from a member of the public. It's always encouraging to hear citizen involvement.
Okay. You should
Gina.
be able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me or see me?
Yes, I can. Good to hear your voice again.
How are you guys?
I'm doing great.
Thank you.
Can you identify yourself for anybody who's listening at home?
Yes, it's Gina Von Eyck. I live at 220 Jefferson. I'm right across from the fiasco that happened with all this. And I just want to thank you for at least addressing this a little bit and being an intermediary, because as a resident, it's been very difficult when I saw this happening for 3 days, because I'm home with this virus and working from my house, to hear it and see it and cringe and send email to the village. And of course, it's like, oh, that's the crazy woman that's complaining. And frankly, I don't care what labels they give me, but it's really bizarre to watch this when we've had such issues of flooding. And that's where I came from with this was, oh my God, now what is this going to do with putting more silt in the river? Because what happened was, because all the cars were gone and everybody with coronavirus is home, you had the parking lot open, which they allowed them to do much more than they normally could when the lot was filled with cars. So you had the trucks, you had the backhoes. There were trees that had to come down because they were tilted for years. I had even complained about them. They're very dangerous, and they would have flooded the river if they went over. It would have been like a dam. So that's been discussed. Those trees were rightly removed, and a couple were hanging over the cars. But the rest of the vegetation, the rest of the small trees, we're doing a great job. And we have wood ducks. We have a lot of animals that live in there. And it kind of also keeps the kids out of that part of the park so the animals can, you know, thrive in that area. That soil was built up when they dredged the rivers. I don't remember the time, but I can find pictures on it. And over the years, as they've done this, it said it floods and it rains, more of it washes away. And that part where it has like a little river is really bad. And that needs to be filled in with something to, I don't know how you do it, block it up. I did go there. Vegetation is growing dramatically in a couple days in spots, mostly on the bank itself. I was surprised that they had the backhoes that pulled out as much as they did at the top at the parking lot level, because when I walked there that night, my foot sunk a good 3 inches into this, what was like sifted flour. It was that soft. There were no roots. There was nothing. And some resident that I'm told lives in the village, he has a modern motorcycle and he had a silver jacket with green stripes down his arms, decided he was going to take this motorcycle and he was going to go up and down this embankment and tear the hell out of it, which is what he did. And then the kids are coming, and the kids are going down the brook because now it's clear. You know, so it invites all that kind of a problem. We used to have willow trees there. When they died, nobody replaced them. Nobody replaced any of the trees as they naturally went with anything. And I think that might be a good thing to do. Right now, it looks like it might be revegetating going down towards the water, but not at top as much. That's really, really mud. And I don't know about planting grasses or using a lawnmower, you know, in a spot where animals are going to be breeding. And, you know, an environmentalist needs to look at that to see what would really work. But you have to do something to stop the silt that's going into the river there, because that's the bridge that still has the arches. It's not the Jefferson Avenue Bridge, it's the Station Plaza Bridge. And when the big trees and all the things come down the river now when it rains, they go through the Jefferson Avenue Bridge, and that's the first stopping point. So the more silt that we put there, the faster we're going to flood. Because then the water will turn the corner and go underneath the Station Bridge, the Halsted Avenue Bridge, you know, and then the one that where the train tracks go over. So it's like a vital spot right there. And that's right where the Sheldrake River aims when it's flooding and the waters are coming fast and it hits it. So if you take a walk there, you kind of get the horrifying picture of, oh no, it's like it's just digging it up. So I'm hoping that maybe getting some procedures in place and figuring out why they would devegetate a wetland, because they never used to go down the bank before. They would just do the top. No one ever walked down, but that they had a lot of time on their hands, and they had the people cutting the trees, so it was like a great day for everybody to be there. We had like 6 trucks, and they took the backhoes and they were digging the hell out of that soil. They even lowered what was there. It used to be raised a little bit higher in that one section where it's got like a little river. So, I mean, that was horrifying to watch. It was more horrifying was that nobody paid attention when I emailed the village and told them, what are you doing? You know, that's that kind of thing. It's like you're wasting the village money, the resources, the taxpayers' money, and you're devegetating and causing more flooding. This is just dumb. You know, we're going through enough with the flooding. I was going to ask your committee to get a hydrologist and do a study, because we have nothing that's going to tell us how much water is going to come at that spot and Columbus Park now because of the Mason being raised 7 feet over 3 acres and the other work that's been done in the floodplain. So all of this is connected. And that's the spot that it goes to. That's the neck of the bottle. So we've got to be real careful what we do there. And I think that your commission, yes, I understand you're not the policeman of the village DPW, but it has to be much stronger hand that's involved in that area of what's happening, because when that water floods in that spot, we're all screwed. And this floodplain is going to be expanding now, has to. So, and we don't know how, when, or why. So we only need some hydrologists to come in and take a good look at that. So basically that's what I have to say. And I appreciate you investing the time and the effort and looking at this.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to comment. Citizen engagement is something I really encourage, and I think it's a good civics lesson for all our neighbors and the kids this community raises, that people pay attention enough to what's going on in the village to stand up at a local board and say something about it. Okay. So Greg, just to cap this discussion, I don't care whether it's a conversation that you have or a conversation that I have offline, but I don't want to have this be, let's talk about this one incident. I want to meet with DPW on the 20th of May for the commission, but I want them to come prepared to talk about what's the manual, what's the checklist, what's the reporting line, whose job is it to think about, hey, that's a sensitive area, here are the procedures we follow. I want to talk process, because this should be and has to be an ongoing internal competence, not something that we spot check.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, it would be good to also involve the village manager, because when I can't direct another department head to just come to the meeting, and so it's really up to the village manager to determine if that's appropriate. So I'll talk with him.
Okay, and if it's useful for me to be a part of that communication, I'll make myself available. All right, I think we have run through all the business that we had noticed to the public, and I think that means we are done. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for your time, folks.
Thanks, Thomas.
Stay well and safe.
Good night, all.
You too.
Good
See you
night.
guys. Thank you.